Good evening. Thank you for joining me this evening. Today our presentation is going to focus on managing conflict in the workplace. Typically speaking, as leaders, we spend a lot of our time managing conflict among our associates. For the purpose of this presentation, I would like us to focus on managing conflict amongst leaders. Leadership and conflict go hand in hand. In fact, leadership is a full contact sport. If you can't, or won't, more importantly, approach conflict head on, you probably should not be in a leadership role. Think about this. It's only something that you can answer. So again, today we're going to be focusing on how to address conflict as leaders amongst the leadership team. In order for our organization to be successful, leaders need to be on the same page. After all, we are one team moving towards the same goal. The focus of this presentation will be on the following. What is conflict? Why is it important to address conflict? What causes conflict? The effects that conflict has, and methods in which to manage conflict. So first of all, let's talk about what conflict is. How many of you can answer that for yourselves? I think each one of us in the room could probably define conflict as something different, but simply put, conflict is a disagreement between two opposing sides. Conflict is not always a bad thing. As we talk about conflict today, I want you to think about that. Think about how you could use conflict in a constructive way. The effects of conflict can be devastating to an organization. The effects can prevent an organization from reaching their goals. Some of the effects that we have seen are decreased productivity, a loss of trust, increased stress. As a result of that, we've seen low performance, high turnover, and absenteeism. After hearing about some of the effects of conflict, why do you think it's important to address conflict? Okay, those are some good answers. First and foremost, from a leadership perspective, we need to grow. Leaders need to continue to develop as well. In order to grow, we need to acknowledge that our way is not the only way. We need to learn to manage conflict so that we learn to communicate. It is a professional courtesy to tell a coworker that you did not feel comfortable with that interaction. If you don't tell someone that you're unhappy with something they said or did, how can you expect them to change the behavior? Communication is a primary factor in resolving conflict. If you don't, it's trouble waiting to happen. If conflict is allowed to continue to occur and it's never addressed, it can become a very unhealthy situation. On the flip side, if you talk about it, that often leads to a solution that could benefit not only you, but the company in the long term. We also want to increase team cohesion. Being part of a team is frequently what drives people to come to work. Teams that work well together also perform better. We want to improve our partnerships across the organization as well. Leaders in this organization come from all different departments. We need to be able to work cross-departmentally, and it's set a good example for our associates. They look to us to pave the way. Our success depends on us working together. Resolving conflict is crucial if we're going to achieve our goal of being profitable. So let's talk about some of the things that have caused conflict. In order to resolve conflict, you must first identify what caused it. So what do you think are some of the things that cause conflict? There are many, many things. Some of the more generalized things that I thought about were philosophical differences, conflicting goals, conflicting roles, conflicting pressures, and differing personal values. Finally, let's talk about some ways to manage conflict. First and foremost, I think the best way to do that is to define acceptable behavior. Within our organization, we have done that through our code of conduct. We have defined clearly what is acceptable behavior for our employees, right down to the behavior of the leaders. We are held to the same standard, if not a higher standard, than our associates. As leaders, you set the expectation for how people communicate with you. Control your emotions. Being emotional will only make the situation worse and could potentially lead to termination. It's important to deal with conflict quickly. Avoiding conflict allows for the problem to exacerbate. While it's okay to step back, certainly you don't want to address something in the moment when you are emotional. It's okay to take a moment to step back and think things through. Don't put off addressing conflict. A good general rule of thumb is to address it within the same day, or at the very most, the very next morning. One of the ways I suggest that you deal with conflict is to vent up. If you need to talk through a situation before you address it, talk to a leader who is above you. Talking to your peers could make the situation worse, as it could be perceived as being a gossip. Be willing to compromise. Try to understand where other people are coming from. Allow the person to explain their point of view fully, and do so without interrupting. If the opposing side can see that you are trying to understand their position, they might be more likely to compromise. Don't allow one conflict to forever impact the relationship between you and a coworker. This is counterproductive. And finally, if that doesn't work, find a mediator. It's always best to try to resolve conflict one-on-one, but if sometimes you just need an outside perspective. This could help in the early stages of learning how to address conflict. As you learn more about how to approach it, the need for a mediator may lessen. The more comfortable you become with your skills and you begin to trust yourself to address situations, a mediator may not be the option that you need. To wrap up, conflict is absolutely unavoidable. While you can lessen the extent of the conflict, you certainly can't avoid it entirely. So embrace it. This is a chance to build better working relationships. Remember, I said earlier, one of our goals was to increase communication. In communication, the better we communicate, the more we communicate, the better off we'll be long term. As leaders, we will help our teams be more successful if we learn to manage conflict in a healthy way. As you move forward, please let me know if you're able to use some of these tools. I'm excited to hear about you putting some of these practices into play. Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to meeting with you again.